All right, my name is Dr. Matt Drake, and along with Dr. Kay Scher, we are board members for the Morehouse Society for Clinical Social Work, representing Metro State University of Denver. How about that? Yes, we are very pleased to put on this licensure event for our students and others that have joined, that we are very excited to help you along the process of fulfilling your dreams and goals for the future. So we want to do
all of them, all your dreams and goals.
Hello introductions, and everybody can just do it on their own, and also you all too. So we want this to be really kind of lively and a lot of participation. If you have questions, just raise your hand, and we can get those questions answered. So we'll start with this.
Figured the three of us would introduce ourselves and talk about what our roles are as social workers, our experiences as supervisees in a variety of settings, and then if we have supervised what those experiences are. So my name is Liz Schulte. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in Colorado. I have license in Colorado. I'm currently in private practice down at I-25 in Colorado. I work primarily with adults, sometimes kids, but not that often. And I work with folks who have a lot of early kind of developmental trauma, relational trauma, and it's playing out in terms of patterns that they see in relationships. I have been obviously both a supervisee and a supervisor. I was a supervisee at QL and my MSU program, and I had what I would call a terrible supervisor and a really good supervisor. I've had some great supervisors since then. I have a wonderful supervisor towards licensure. It's really transformative. So I got a second master's degree. I do currently supervise students, MSU students, both first years and second years, and I do supervise folks towards licensure. And it's a really fun process. It's really great to be part of that learning and learning from folks because you all are learning kind of the latest, the greatest, and what's going on in the field today. So it's really wonderful to be able to learn from students and grads. So, take it away, Adam.
All right.
They're having some trouble hearing on Zoom, so I'm just going to be even closer to you.
Yeah, we were probably louder.
Sorry.
Can you hear us?
We're just going to have a more intimate
Okay.
experience
Yep.
than you thought.
That angle is pretty good.
That's better. It's better.
All right. My name is Adam Nowicki. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a licensed addictions counselor. Let's see.
Adam's an overachiever.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit. But it's really more to assuage the existential anxiety that I always feel. So that's really what it is. So currently I work at the Mental Health Center of Denver. I'm a therapist there at the Adult Recovery Center. I've been with the Mental Health Center of Denver for 7+ years now. Been in this role for about 2.5 years. I got really lucky because I came out of school and was able to get in a therapist role. And about 2 days later, they changed it. So before you just needed an MSW, and then they changed it to where you actually need to be licensed. They didn't change it because of me, so it's not the issue. At least I don't think. I just really lucked out. I also, let's see, I started my own business about a year ago, my own private practice. It's called Level Up Counseling and Consulting. So at MHCD, I see adults. At Level Up, I work with adolescents and families because that's kind of where my passion is. My specialization, I actually graduated from MSU Denver, unlike these two, so remember that. And my specialization was in working with children, youth, and families. So I've always kind of had a passion for doing that. Beyond that, I also do a social work podcast, the Social Work Duo. I lead it with my cohort, Deborah. So my supervision experiences, let's see, I can really speak to the Community Mental Health Center track. Do they have this paper there? They have these handouts.
I'll pull them up as we're talking about them.
Okay, good. So if you have questions, I can really speak to that because that's the track I took. My experiences with supervision were not very good. I think maybe as a student, it was challenging, and then I would think in the workplace it was somewhat challenging. So yeah, I'm happy to speak more about that. I've been lucky because I've been surrounded by peers that are all very knowledgeable, and that are just as qualified as my supervisors at work to supervise as well. So yeah, I've been really lucky in that regard that I could get supervision that way. I did finally achieve supervision and do the hours and all that fun stuff. And I got licensed, I got my LCSW in November. So yeah. I feel like there's something I'm forgetting, but it's not relevant.
We'll figure it out.
You said you were an alumni of this program, so that's what's most
Yes,
important.
I am an alumni.
Yes,
Graduated
absolutely.
in 2016, and I love the program. I did the in-class program, so I wasn't online, so I'm not familiar with that experience. And it was tough. It was real tough because I worked, and actually my first year, I worked full-time, awake overnights at a residential house, and did an internship and did school full-time on the weekends. It was hell. So luckily I said if I could do this for a year, I'll probably never work that hard in my life. So kind of right.
You were married too, right?
And newly married, doing all that fun stuff. So, but luckily I have a good support system, and self-care was always really important. So just paying attention. I mean, get as much sleep as you can. I think I was averaging about 4.5 a night, but on the nights I had to work. So
Not recommended.
right.
Yeah.
But I made it through, and I'm better for it. So yeah. So I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Janessa, social worker for hospice. I'm an LSW. I went through that track starting, I graduated from DU in June, studied for the exam. I think I took it in like August. And while I was job hunting, and then got my LSW, passed the exam, got my LSW like a month later. That process is a little tricky, so we'll get into it. But just stay the course. I'm now working in hospice, and I don't have supervision at my actual job, which is really hard. I'm the only social worker there. So managing my caseload has been tricky. Thank goodness for Liz. She took me on for supervision. So I've been getting supervision outside of work, which in a lot of ways is a huge plus. And we can talk about that more as a group. Kind of the ins and outs of getting supervision at work versus outside of work. And my supervision experience during school was challenging the first year. I really did not have good, strong support from a supervisor. And then my second year, I had an amazing LCSW supervisor. So it made all the difference for my experience doing those internships, because you're putting a lot into it. So it was really neat to get good supervision. I highly recommend being picky and just waiting till you find that really good fit. So that's kind of my plug. Am I forgetting anything on that list? Can everyone hear me? I sometimes get quiet. Let me know.
I'll keep you posted and continue to channel your comments to the group.
And so we'd love to.
They can hear. Sorry.
Okay.
We'd love to get to know you all a little bit. You can share your name, something about you. I know not all of you are in school right now, and what you would like to get out of this conversation today. And I'll jot down some of those things and make sure we cover them all.
And for those on Zoom, perhaps it might be a little difficult to do all the introductions, but I suspect it would be really especially helpful to hear what you'd like to get out of this session as well, so that we can make sure we're meeting your needs as well.
Absolutely.
They're gonna be so tired of hearing from me at the end of this.
So who wants to go? You want to go? Okay.
I'm Gina English, and I'm at the social work program here at the master's program, and I'll be graduating in the middle of May. So I'm coming to here because I want to know, I want to know the next step, like what the things I do. I know I want to work with kids, and I know I want to eventually get my license. I just want to know like which path I need to take, where to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay.
Would you all feel comfortable with me pointing the computer around as you're talking? I just want everyone to feel connected.
I am Beth. I'm a concentration student graduate. Kind of partially my same LSW.
All right. Okay.
And then there's been a lot of discussion in one of our classes. Some people are able to register for the test.
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to.
So that's part of why we're here.
Yep, we can talk about that, for sure.
I'm Maggie. Want to figure out more about just the process to getting CSCSW. Interested in homeless and also addiction work. Also interested in getting mental health track and just any tips and advice on picking a supervisor, or if that supervisory relationship ends up not being a good one, how to navigate that. My name's Alina. I'm also a conservation year bachelor graduate. And just kind of what everyone else has said, I just kind of want a clarification on kind of next steps of the process. I've got my jurisprudence done too. Got that out of the way, but holding period, register with record free, and kind of that whole process.
Okay, well, my name is Jody, and I have my bachelor's in social work, my master's in social work. I've been a social worker for over 25 years. I've been a field supervisor before. Hopefully I'm a good one. I don't know. And I've never gotten licensed because when I graduated, you just needed a master's. And I always thought, I remember I had some paid clinical supervision and some through my job. And then I remember I didn't want to pay for individual, and I never really wanted to be in private practice, so there was no reason. And now, I see that, you just don't need your master's, you really have to be licensed. So here I am. And there's one other thing I was going to say. And I've worked mostly with older adults, so focused really in gerontology all these years.
I don't see any comments yet from the folks in Zoom about any specifics that folks are interested in having addressed. Nope, just kidding. Hannah says that they won't be graduating for a couple of years, but I'm curious to know if there's anything I can do ahead of time / be working on in the meantime to prepare for working towards my license upon receiving my MSW. Good question, Hannah.
I think one thing you can all do that will help in your social work careers is joining the Colorado Society for Clinical Social Work. The student fee, if you register now, you get to pay the student fee, and you have it for a year. What's the student fee?
Oh, come on.
It's like 30 bucks.
It's 30.
Yeah, it's 30 bucks for a year.
Now what does that get you?
That gets you can come every month to our salon. Salons are cool. We always hang out. We have good topics. This month we had someone presenting on.
There's booze.
Yeah, there is booze. Someone presenting on
Food.
pharmacology. So that will be an exciting topic. And we do something in the summer months. We usually do cocktails and conversations. So we discuss. It's a way to connect with social workers in the field and really just kind of see what everybody's up to. I found it really helpful because I went from, in graduate school, you're always in it talking about social work, really with a lot of motivated people. I mean, you're going like 100 miles an hour, and then, after graduation, it kind of all stops. But it doesn't have to. And that was important for me. I was really lucky because I actually won a scholarship to join the organization, and that's what kind of jumped me into it.
And we all kind of forgot to say that we're also on the board. I mean, we are representing the Clinical Society, but we're also on.
That's what I forgot.
Yeah.
And I started as a student liaison, which was amazing. So you started you were just after a student, right? You came on right after.
Yeah.
graduated. I came on my first year in my master's program, and it was like just the most amazing group to be involved in. So it is a great way to get involved and just get support. Huge way to get support because I just didn't have enough outside of my program.
There's a lot of networking that goes on. I've seen a lot of students and new grads talking to folks who've been in the field about job prospects, making connections, who can I call to talk to about this, that, and the other. So it really is a great way to connect with your colleagues.
An awesome way to find your supervisor.
Yeah.
That's how I did it.
Yeah,
So,
it is. And we will be giving you all a supervisor list. I asked our admin person to email that to you, Kay. And so we'll have a list of folks who offer supervision. A lot of them will offer lower cost supervision. So that'll be a good list for you all to have.
And I've got a couple of questions from our audience.
I do want to do just one more plug. I'm sorry.
Oh, just kidding. Hold on. Hold on.
The Ina May Denim Award is available now.
Yes.
So I think it's available for another couple weeks.
Yep.
It's something you can apply for, and it just requires submitting a paper, and that'll actually be reviewed by myself and my committee. And the award, I actually won it a couple years ago. The award is $250 and a year membership with CSCSW. So I encourage you all to apply. That goes for the online people as well.
Yes, and so Sarah has asked, what is the name of the group? Fantastic question, Sarah. You may not be able to see back here on the board, but we've got some contact information and we can send that along to folks as well. But folks here presenting today are part of the Colorado Society for Clinical Social Work. And so that's the group. Happy to share some more information. Both myself, I'm Dr. Kay Scherer, and I'm mostly affiliated with the bachelor's program, but a faculty member in the department, and my colleague, Dr. Drake, over here, Matt Drake, are both available to answer questions or help make that connection. Maria asked, what is the name of that award? How does one apply? Great question, Maria. It has come out over the email listserv from Kayla. Ina May Dunham is the name of the award. Let me see if I can type it in here.
We can send an email to us and we'll directly send the.
Yes, and then DMHA.
So that's the name of the award. We've got so search your inbox for that information. We also have a specific question about moving between states from Maria. And I didn't introduce myself or share any information about myself, but I'm someone who had the experience of being licensed previously in another state and then doing what's called licensure by endorsement in the state of Colorado to have those hours in supervision transfer. So hold on to that question, Maria, or I guess I'll try to hold on to that question and see if we can answer it when we're talking a little bit more about transferring licensures between states. And then let's see, there's another question from Courtney who says, I've seen some social work licensure exam books like GRE study books. Would those be helpful to study from starting now, especially if we have test anxiety?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry,
Absolutely.
what was the beginning of the question?
There's some social work licensure exam books that look like GRE study books.
Right.
Would those be helpful to study from?
Yes,
And we've got some recommendations. I jotted down some recommendations for you all of different guides that folks have found helpful. And I guess I can go ahead and share those at this time. One of them is the ASWB Guide and Practice Test. And ASWB stands for Association of Social Work Boards. And they are the ones that you register to take the exam through. So they have their guide. And a lot of folks talk about that and say it's a really good guide. And then they found taking the practice test very helpful. You do have to pay, I think, for the practice tests, but those are helpful. And then Dawn Apgar, APGAR, is another one. There's a study guide by Dawn Apgar. Do you know the name of it?
It's like clinical exam study guide. She has two. She has like, I think, the master's in clinical. Go with
Yeah. And we'll talk about which exam to look at taking.
And that's the one I used and I passed the test.
And then another one that I've heard a lot about is the Pocket Prep app. You're nodding your head. You know that one?
Yeah, I haven't downloaded it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard that's really helpful. And that you can just take with you on the go.
It's only $20 for 500. So that's way cheaper.
Ooh.
Goodbye.
Oh,
Some of
yeah.
these you can find through the library.
Yeah.
Last time I checked, last year, I think I looked at ASWB. There was an older version you can find through the library.
Excellent.
What I particularly loved about the AFGAR book, and I can't speak for the others because I didn't use them, is that she goes through how to take the test. Because really, you can study content until you're blue in the face, but it's about how they structure the questions and how they ask them and just thinking about them. And she literally gives you like tips. I can't remember if it's 25 tips, and I went through those like 10 times and starred the ones that I wanted to go back to the day before. I felt like that was possibly the most help I got, because I really think you can study content only so much, and you're not going to necessarily need that for the test, except for I just thought her guidance was great. I can't say enough about it.
And
So tell me
along
how
the-
to look at the questions, how to read them, what are they looking for, and it can be training for the test.
Yeah.
It's the AFGAR book, so it's Dawn AFGAR, and there's multiple versions. I actually used the 2015 because I was that cheap. I bought it for like $15. I was just getting money at a time. So there's obviously updated versions every year, and it's called a Comprehensive Study Guide for Success. It's a clinical exam guide, social work ASWB. Like you'll find it if you Amazon it. Oftentimes, if you're on chat groups or Facebook groups with former students, you'll find people posting their books for cheap. So if like money is an issue and you don't want to spend however much it is new, you can get it for a good price.
And to piggyback off of what Janessa was saying, it's really important to know how to take the exam. Content, you all are coming out of grad school, you've got the content. It's how do you take the exam? How do you read the questions? How do you weed out the ones you know are absolutely not the right answer? And to that end, in addition to some of the books that are out there, other folks find it helpful to take a review course. And I don't know, you all don't do one, do you, at MSU? Okay.
No, we don't.
CSCSW through DU does offer one, and there are others in the community that offer courses as well. There's a longtime social worker in the community, Dr. Sandra Holman, who does a licensure prep course as well. So those are other things you can look at. I took the DU licensure prep course and thought it was great. Really taught me how to take the exam, and because I'm a procrastinator at times, I studied off and on for 2 weeks before, and then studied for a weekend, and did pass the exam on the first try. So I felt it was good because it really teaches you how to take the exam, teaches you what the questions are, and that is important.
Is that online or was that like a classroom?
The DU one, when I took it, was on the ground, but they may have an online version. You can get on their website and see what they offer. I wouldn't be surprised if they have an online version now, but it was on the ground at the time, and I bet they have both. I don't know for certain, but I bet they have both.
So quick heads up, you can get
Yes.
2018, 2017, 2015 online free.
What? Online, free.
Wow.
What an amazing
It looks
library
like-
resource
I'm
to
having trouble
access while you're
downloading
still
it
a
'cause my
student.
connection's terrible here, but it says full text.
Oh, you can download it.
Looks like you can download it.
Through your library.
Yeah, since I left the people.
If you wait a few days, you can download, then recheck it out. Download, recheck it out.
Huh,
That's interesting.
there you go.
That's
And then you
awesome.
can share it. Yeah, never. I've never done something like
Let
that
me see
either.
if I can, I'm gonna just do a double check.
And Matt's not gonna do that right now for you all either. Okay.
My advice with regard to the test would be to do the practice test, because that I did, I forget how many questions. 140, 170, something like that, yeah.
And not all of, there are about 20 or so that are throwaways.
Right.
So 20 or 30 that are throwaways. They're testing them out and you don't know which ones they are.
So one thing I did is when I took the practice test, I allotted, because you get 4 hours of time to do it. So I timed myself. I said, okay, let's see how long I can do kind of endurance-wise to get through it. I made it through about 70. Took a little break, went back, did like another 70, took a little break, went back, did like 60 or whatever. And then, so that was kind of the endurance, like how much kind of endurance-wise can I do. And then when I went to the actual testing center, it was really nice. It was pretty laid back. The anxiety level was pretty low. But that I found kind of doing that prepared me for the endurance piece. Actually didn't need to take all those breaks. Like you have 4 hours to do it. Yeah, you probably knock it out in 2.5.
You gotta go to a testing center. How often is it offered?
There, it's certain testing centers and it's just a slot, so they offer a certain amount. I think there was like a noon option and a later option. It's like twice a day they offer it, and it's competitive because you'll notice when you graduate, especially I think you graduate before DU. So basically, we were in a spot to get slots because y'all were already registered. So yeah, I didn't actually get to take the test till I think like late August or something, even though I was like ready and willing to sign up sooner. So that's a great advantage you have. I think your plan, or Adam's plan, also alleviates that anxiety that was referred to, because we all get test anxiety. Just having a plan for what works for you. Everyone's a little different. Some people just want to go straight through, get it done. But doing that practice gives you an idea of like how you're going to feel. I actually did do a practice test because that gives me more anxiety than just doing it once. So for me, it caused anxiety even thinking about doing a practice. So I didn't. But everyone's going to have your own way of doing it. Just kind of trust yourself. You've been in school long enough. You kind of know what works for you. I took a yoga break for 15 minutes out in the hallway because they let you leave. And I just took a yoga break. It like calmed me down. I went back in, finished. I think I was done in an hour and 45 minutes. So it gives you plenty of time. So don't worry anxiety-wise about the time. I really think people do get really amped up, and they're going to be fine.
Just a warning at the very end, after you've answered your last question and you press, when you're sitting there and your heart's racing and you're sweating and you're ready to press submit, you press submit. They make you answer a survey before they'll give you your results.
Mean.
It is really mean.
That's how you get people to do research, though.
It's heart-wrenching. You're just like,
So I'm
True.
trying to, like, how often is it offered? Like every other month, every 3 months, once a month?
It's just ongoing.
yeah,
It's just whatever's
ongoing,
open.
yeah,
Yeah.
but twice a day.
Yeah. And there are lots of different locales that you can do that. I want to make sure we kind of go through the different pathways to get there. And, we'll weave in lots of different questions that you all may have that may or may not be related to the materials we're presenting at the moment. But I just want to make sure we kind of give you a general overview of what this looks like, because it's kind of complicated in Colorado. It's not as clear cut as some other states. We will also talk about what it's like to become licensed in one state and move to another, and then what it's like if you start the licensure process in one state and try to finish it up in another. So
we'll be getting to your question soon, Maria.
Yes, we will, and I wrote that down. So yeah, because it's a good one.
And if you wouldn't mind, as you're, I'm going to pull up the handouts for the Zoom group as we're talking about them, but just kind of flag them for me so I
all right.
don't pull up the wrong one.
First one we're going to look at is the flow chart. The flow chart, my former career was as an accountant, so I have a little bit of a need to kind of, some things I really need to organize. I'm not structured in the way that I conduct therapy at all, but when it comes to processes like these, I really had a need to try to have something visually that made sense. So that's my effort with the flow chart. And any feedback or if you notice any typos or anything that doesn't make sense, please let me know. Constantly updating this thing. So the first step in getting licensed is obtaining your master's degree or your doctorate degree from a CSWE approved social work program. And there was some talk about, can you register for the exam before you graduate. ASWB will not let you register for the exam unless I think you can do the yes, you have completed the requirements for your degree. There's a form that your registrar can fill out, but they won't actually let you register until you have completed your degree requirements. Now you can go to DORA and begin the application process for your LSW should you decide to go that route before you graduate, but it's not really going to get you anything because you can't get any movement on that until you actually graduate. And so there's a difference between, completed your degree requirements and the degree was conferred. So you gotta do that first. And then in Colorado, there are 4 different paths towards social work licensure. One of them you'll end up with 2 licenses. You'll be a licensed social worker, and then you'll be an LCSW. Another pathway is if you work for what's called an exempt facility, and that's community mental health centers are considered exempt facilities. They don't fall under the Department of Regulatory Agencies, or DORA as they're called. They are under another group, and so they don't have the same requirements as DORA does for mental health professionals, and that's why their requirements, as we'll see when we look at the narratives, are a bit different. Another pathway that you can go is to get a provisional social work license, and that is only available if you work at a residential child care facility, and that is defined in the Mental Health Practice Act. I don't know what that is. We have another colleague that was going to be here tonight, but has recently had a child, so couldn't make it. And she did part of her licensure at a residential child care facility. So she was an SWP. And then the 4th pathway is the registered psychotherapist route. And you'll note that it says unlicensed in capital letters. Colorado is one of 2 states in the nation that has something like this. And being a registered psychotherapist, there are 0 education requirements and there are no experience requirements to get this. You just have to be able to pass an open book test, online test, that you have 30 days to complete. And you can take that as many times as you want. So yes, it is one direction you can take to get to social work licensure. It's not one that is recommended. It is a good idea to become licensed and under the regulation of your licensing body, Social Work Board of Examiners, or in the case of community mental health, going that route as well. And you can still get licensed if you go that route. So you'll notice in this, in the overview, that each path has kind of different steps that you take. So let's start with the licensed social worker narrative. So it'll be the one that at the top says licensed social worker. We're going to start with that one first. And I'll let Kay get that up for folks.
I think we're there, and folks
Okay.
can let me know what they can see and can't see.
Hopefully
And we can, I put my email address earlier in our chat room, but if folks want to email me at some point, I will send a copy of all of the handouts to everyone.
And so what I'm going to do, I don't want to make this terribly boring. So I'm going to kind of do a quick overview of each one. I want to give you kind of an orientation to the layout of each sheet, because there is information on here that I wanted you all to have, which is important no matter what process you take. So along the left-hand side of all of these handouts, you'll see kind of a list of things. And the really long list is social work that as defined in the Mental Health Practice Act. And these are pretty much anything you do anywhere is going to be found in this list. Anything you do as a social worker in any capacity in any agency is going to be on this list. It's all things social work. The folks who were very invested in writing the Mental Health Practice Act, the social workers who were really trying to get in all things social work, because we know how much we do. We know how varied it is, and it's all important. So the smaller section down at the bottom is relevant to those of you who are going to pursue the LCSW licensure designation. And so I am going to read this one out. out to you all and tell you a little bit about what this means. So you're going to need 3,360 hours of supervised experience hours to get your LCSW after you graduate. And of that, a minimum of half of those, so it's 1,680, must include, and I'm going to quote this, a professional relationship that involves treatment, diagnosis, testing, assessment, or counseling. And that may occur during any one of the following activities. I'll let you all read that out. But these are things.
Where are you reading?
Very bottom part.
On the left-hand side,
On the
yeah.
left-hand side, the
Over
very
here.
bottom part. So these are what you think of as kind of therapy activities and or clinical social work in general. So just about anywhere you go and have a job, if you are working with people, you're going to be doing some of those things. So you're going to get at least half of your hours doing some of those things. And the other half will be anything else that is social work related. So I just wanted to draw your attention to that piece. I've also given you at the bottom of this some resources, and Kay will email this out so that you can use those links. And those links are to ASWB, the link that will take you to registering for the exams in Colorado. Of course, CSCSW, Colorado Society for Clinical Social Work. When you want to join, you go there. Just make sure you do it before you graduate. The DORA Board of Social Work Examiners, you're going to need to go there to be able to register for the LSW, because that's the sheet we're looking at. And then the jurisprudence websites, they've got some study materials and then a link to actually take the exam. And then also a link to NASW Colorado, another very important organization to join, especially as a student, because again, it's a really reduced cost. There are a lot of benefits you get from being an NASW member as well. So at the top of the LSW narrative page, I put that, you know, one of the reasons to become an LSW is that it does reflect a higher level of competency, professional competency, because you're obtaining a graduate degree and you're passing an ASWB national exam, and it is a license. So you're going to get your required education, and then you're going to take two exams to go the LSW route. You're going to have to take the jurisprudence exam, which some of you have already taken. How was that? Was that fun? Okay.
Another thing.
Wow, that's much more favorably than I
Yes.
would describe it.
So did you have some study guide or there's no book?
Well, it's all based on the mental health practice act.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
had like the ACTA, and I had like social work board rules up, and
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind of put back. Control.
Yes.
Yeah, searching,
Yes.
use the
Research
search function.
keywords for the question.
And just so tell your classmates and any colleagues you may know that are thinking about taking this exam. It is online. DORA tracks the IP addresses and will know if people are kind of coming together and sitting in the same room and taking it together. So just something to be aware of, because they are digging people for that and will, I don't know, you get some sort of sanction from DORA before you even start the process. So just kind of make sure that you're not taking it together, because they will know. They figure these things out.
Good advice.
Yeah.
It looks like Gina, is it?
Yes.
The Mental Health Practice Act, and then there's
The social work rules.
The social work rules.
Yes.
And the DORA website has links to both of those.
Yeah.
So I just kept those 2 pages up because those 2 pages had all the answers were in those 2.
And you can download them and then do a Control F, the control find, and you'll be able to do it. You'll get to know the Mental Health Practice Act and the rules pretty well after you do this. And I have heard that that's the sole reason for having the jurisprudence exam, is so that clinicians will read the Mental Health Practice Act once in their career.
Yep.
And the rules. So yeah. Okay. So next, so you're going to take the jurisprudence exam, and it's $20 per attempt. It's open book. You have 30 days to take it. Then you're going to register for one of the ASWB national exams. So this is kind of tricky if you're thinking about going to another state and getting licensed in that other state. So here I'm going to deviate a little bit and say, if you're going to get licensed in another state as an LCSW, go to that state's requirements first, talk to that state's licensing board talk to anybody you can talk to there to find out the process. Colorado is really lenient, and so a lot of our processes will not align nicely if you try to go to another state midstream. You know, it's easier to get a license someplace else and transfer into Colorado, or start the process someplace else and then transfer into Colorado and complete it. It can be very difficult to start the process in Colorado and go someplace else. New York is one of those states that if you are thinking about getting a license there, it's probably best to just go. Graduate, go, and start it there. I think California is another one that it's really, really tough to start outside of California and then get licensed because they have really strict requirements.
And look
Well,
at,
different
I
set of
recommend
tests.
looking
Yes.
at them before you graduate, even
Yeah.
like the first year students or students that are 2
Yeah.
years out, because they also require different coursework or program you may not be taking. So check, like, I know they include like domestic violence, they include like certain specific classes that you have to have. So it's no big deal if you don't have them, you'll just have to take them when you go there, but it's like you're already in school.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about California, and so I tried to gear my studies toward that licensure as well. So if you are thinking about it, not only look at the licensure, but look at their course requirements.
It's just a horror story. I had a classmate who started the licensure process here in Colorado and was like at least halfway through it, and then decided to move back to New York and lost all supervision and experience hours because the requirements are so different. So had to start afresh. I think the only thing, she didn't even get to keep the exam because she had to take 2 exams there. That's the other part of this. Colorado, ultimately for your LCSW, you only have to take either the advanced generalist exam or the clinical exam. Other states require you to take the master's exam and then either the clinical or the advanced generalist. So just make sure you know where you're going and know the rules. So having said all that, at step 2 for an LSW, you're going to take one of the ASWB national exams. I recommend the clinical exam if you're staying in Colorado. It's done. That's it. That's your exam. You don't have to take another one.
That's one that I think also transfers well across states.
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
So that's also a good one in
Yeah.
general. I mean, again, you should check specific states, but
Yeah.
is one that tends to transfer better than the
It
advanced
does.
generalist, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why we recommend it as well. I had a little blurb on there, but it got really messy on the sheet. But yes, what Kay said. Absolutely. So after you pass the jurisprudence, you pass the ASWB exam, you're gonna submit your application to DORA. With ASWB, they are gonna require a copy of, I think, your transcript and maybe just that your degree has been completed form. I don't think they require the full transcript yet. They may though. But DORA also requires your transcript. And Janessa got held up there because they didn't say that on the website. I think they changed
It's
it.
not on their application, or it wasn't in August
Yes.
or July when I was doing it.
So based upon Janessa's feedback, we emailed Dora and we got them to add that to their checklist.
Hopefully it's straightforward
Yes,
now.
yes,
Because you'll
Yeah.
wait like 6 weeks and then they'll email you and be like, you didn't send your transcript. We
Yeah.
didn't ask for it. I already
Yes.
submitted it to take my board exam. So anyway.
yeah. And ASWB and Dora do not talk, other than for ASWB to send your passing or not passing results to Dora. So you'll have to send 2 transcripts. So your academic institution ends up making a little bit more money. Yay. So once you complete your app, you submit your transcript, and then you get to do the fun stuff, which is work. You get to accumulate your experience and supervision hours. So you wait until you get verification of your LSW, because no hours will count until that point, should you go this route. You'll find an LCSW supervisor, and we will talk about some good things to look for in supervisors. And there are some exceptions to having an LCSW supervisor or not, but they are rare and they have to be pre-approved by DORA. So just to let you know that. You will have to complete 3,360 experience hours, concurrent with at least 96 hours of clinical supervision. And of those 96 hours, 48 hours must be individual face-to-face supervision, and 48 hours may be in a group setting. As it stands in Colorado right now, we do not have a mechanism for virtual or video conferencing supervision account. It has to be in person. So we're working to change that. We're working to change the rules so that we can keep up with, technology in the world and actually allow people to be able to select a supervisor in Colorado that may not be somebody that they can see. This is really important for rural, remote, tribal folk, because otherwise, how are you going to get an LCSW supervisor? And right now in Colorado, that is the expectation. So there's an effort this year to try to change that. Hopefully that'll happen. And these experience hours and supervision hours must be distributed evenly over a minimum of 24 months and a maximum of 5 years. So if you haven't, if you started the process or you got your LSW, you pass the exam, the jurist, and all of that, and you don't get your LCSW within 5 years, the exams expire and you have to take them again. So just something to think about. However, if you're kind of close, Dora will work with you. So that's the other thing that, if you have some extenuating circumstances, you can talk to them and they will hopefully allow you a little more than 5 years. Step 5, and this step you may not have to do if you take the advanced generalist or the clinical exam, is to take, if you only took the master's exam, then you have to take one of the other two. Step 6, submit your LCSW Dora app and you'll complete the fee and pay them again. And then you receive notification of your LCSW from anywhere from 2 weeks to 6 weeks or 3 months, whatever, however long it takes them to get it all done.
I was going to say, it seemed like there was a waiting step missing in there.
Oh yeah,
Right.
I don't want to be too depressing.
Yeah, of course.
About 6 weeks, and then I emailed them.
Yeah, how squeaky can I be with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then they're like, "Oh yeah, it was right on the desk here. I was just about to get to it." And then it literally took them 10 minutes.
So listen to these two. Use your social work skills.
Right.
Make people happy. Do gentle confrontations.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. All right. So once you get your LCSW, you get bragging rights and your business cards. You're competent to engage in independent practice and perhaps a pay bump, which would be nice because some of the community mental health centers I've heard will give you a significant pay bump.
Which did happen to me. I think I got about 20%.
Which is
20,
pretty cool.
25%.
That is not a small pay bump.
No,
It's
it's
not.
not.
Nice.
Yeah. All righty. So the rest of these are kind of laid out in a similar way.
And-
Let's go ahead.
And Liz, would you say this is probably the most common pathway for folks navigating this process, or
Not necessarily.
not necessarily?
Yeah.
All right.
I hear folks kind of running the gamut on all of this.
Okay.
It is NASW endorses becoming an LSW across, no matter what. They endorse that, and they absolutely do not endorse becoming a registered psychotherapist. So that is a stance that they've taken. The Clinical Society hasn't taken a stance. So politics, but it really, I don't know, it varies. People take all 4 pathways.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's just kind of up to you and your circumstances. Let's go to the handout on employment at an exempt facility. And I put in parentheses under that one, community mental health centers. Now, if you look at this one, it seems like there are kind of fewer steps almost, because you don't have to do anything out of the gate except work for a community mental health center in a job that allows you to do these. Half of your hours will be all of these different social work activities, and the other half will be more of the real clinical meaty stuff. So you start working there and you get an LCSW supervisor, you get your degree, get an LCSW supervisor, do your experience hours and your supervision hours, and then you pass your required exams, which you can really do at any point if you want. And again, take either the advanced generalist or the clinical recommended, apply to DORA, and then you become an LCSW. It's important to note that if you go the community mental health route, that can be your only place of employment to have this apply to all your hours. Because you went into private practice partway through, didn't you?
Not completely. Yeah, it's part-time. I still work full time.
Right, but you were in private practice and working in a community mental health center.
Correct.
So you had to become an LSW for the hours of private practice to count.
I did.
Ah.
But I did do the LSW route because I wanted the LSW.
Yeah. So if you decide you're not going to work in community mental health anymore and you're going to go work for another agency, then you've got to do something else to be able to count the hours once you leave the community mental health center. Or if you're doing some moonlighting in private practice, same deal. You're going to have to do something else to get those hours to count. Okay, so
For the record, I don't advise starting your own private practice right out of the gate. I know I didn't take my own advice. I waited about a year, but I also felt like, number one, I had been in the field for a long time. I'm probably a little bit older than y'all, but I had been in the field. I had been in the field for a bit, had the experience. I had good support around me, a good group, CSCSW, so I felt like if I needed any supervision questions, I could do that. And so that was kind of my thinking around that, because it is a lot of work, and I think being in an agency or being in something like that provides a lot of unique experiences, and you have your peers. Had I just gone solo right into private practice, I don't think you're as good. You know, I think you kind of got to get into the, kind of in the trenches a little bit, so that you can have those experiences, be with peers, be in the community. And, I think I had a lot of that going into private practice, and I still do it now. So just be advised.
and you don't know what you don't know. And DORA, as I'm sure you've all heard of DORA before, DORA is all about consumer protection. They are not out there to have any kind of concern over practitioners, and anyone can file a complaint against you, no matter how frivolous. So if you don't have all your ducks in a row, if you don't have your experience, if you haven't been in an agency and kind of seen how things have operated, if you don't have your community, you can really open yourself up to a lot of heartache and a lot of headaches. So it's a good idea to do the standard, go through an agency, work in an agency. I've done residential. I got my licensure working as a case manager in a homeless shelter. I was there a few years, and I am a second career person, so I was a little older, and I was very tired by the end of all that and ready to be done, but it was a wonderful experience. And highly recommend that you get into agency practice. The next one that we're going to go through is the provisional social work license. Full disclosure, this is the one I know the least about. So I got on Dora's website and tried to figure out as much as I could about the process. And here's what I learned. You do have to work in a residential child care facility. Like community mental health, you do not have to pass any kind of exam prior to getting this provisional license. You get your degree, and then you go to Dora and you fill out their application, and they have a provisional social work verification of practice form, and I believe somebody at the residential child care facility has to fill that out. And then you also have to submit a mandatory disclosure statement. And that is something that is required to be given to clients at your first meeting if you are under the Mental Health Practice Act. And I believe they do that also in community mental health centers. It's the informed consent process. It's a consumer warning statement. It lets your client know your education, your licensure, all the different levels of licensure in the state of Colorado. It lets them know how to contact Dora if they would like to file a complaint. You're also giving them information about confidentiality. And most of you, if not all of you, will find yourself giving out such a form as you work towards licensure, because you're going to be in those capacities. So Dora does have a sample on the website, but it's always good to check they have a model one on the website, but it's good to check the Mental Health Practice Act for what needs to go into that as well, because they've at times had a sample up that has not been in compliance with the statute, which is problematic. So you'll fill out your application, and again, you'll do the accumulating your experience and supervision hours, You'll end up taking the jurisprudence exam, one of the ASWB exams. You'll complete your LCSW application and you become an LCSW. Real quick, let's look at the final one, which is the registered psychotherapist. Again, no educational or professional testing requirements necessary to hold this designation, and there is no required continuing education. For this, in order to work towards social work licensure, you'll get your master's or doctorate degree. You'll pass the jurisprudence exam. You'll complete the app at DORA. You'll submit your sample mandatory disclosure statement, and then you'll go through the whole experience and supervision hours thing. And then you'll pass your exam, your ASWB exam, and do the licensure application and become an LCSW. So that is that process. It's a little onerous, I know, and a bit confusing. So we, the Clinical Society is around for questions on that. You can always contact us about this process. We're not done talking about it yet. I just want to give you resources, and NASW Colorado will happily talk with you about the process as well. So do folks have any questions at this time about this process, to see if we can kind of unpack it a little bit more?
Dora
Yes.
online has asked, why isn't the last pathway recommended? Good question.
It's not recommended because there are no education requirements at all. You don't even need a high school education, and there are no experience requirements. So, and I hope I'm not offending anybody. Essentially, you could be a plumber and be able to pass an online open book exam and hang out your shingle and provide psychotherapy just like any of the rest of us to the public. And so it is a database that's full of people who have varying different backgrounds. And we really do recommend that you be under the licensing body for your professional discipline, which is social work. And that's why we really recommend that. And because there are so many different ways to get licensed in the state of Colorado, there's really no reason to go that route. And so we really don't recommend it. It's not a professional designation. And it came about at a time when there was licensure in Colorado only for psychiatrists and psychologists. And it was well before social work had licensure, the LPCs had licensure, the LMFTs. So it really, it's kind of something that's a throwback, and we are one of 2 states in the nation that have it. And Vermont has it, but it's only intended to be temporary. So we're working to shrink that database and have additional requirements for folks to really be proficient in their practice and their educational background.
Kind of like being a life coach. Oops, I didn't say that.
Yes, you did, and yes, it is. It is. And right now, if you truly are putting yourself out there and don't have any kind of license, that's not regulated at all. Yeah.
Do you know what the difference is between advanced generalist and clinical?
No.
You can look at the different books.
I was gonna put a plug in about studying for the clinical, that if you didn't take a DSM class, it's okay, don't panic, but definitely review the DSM so that you have an idea of the diagnoses and can recognize them, because they will be on the test. You don't have to have, you don't literally need to memorize it, but you do need to be familiar with it and how to find things and what steps to take in diagnosis. So you definitely want to review that. I had friends who didn't take a DSM class and they were panicking, but I was just like, review how to do it and how to use it, know the sections, know what's in each section, be able to recognize diagnoses. You'll be fine.
So it sounds like if you're going to community mental health path, stuff you if you're not engaged.
Right. A lot less steps when you look at that one.
Save
a lot less
$70.
steps.
Yes.
Yeah, and you do save money. You're absolutely right.
Can you speak to the supervision piece with that? So going the community mental health route, obviously I'm getting supervision. If let's say I accrue 1,500 hours and I have my supervisor sign off on that, if I decide to transfer somewhere, those hours still remain? Right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And one thing that I recommend and I do for supervisees periodically is fill out the post-degree supervision form and have them sign off on your hours up to whatever point, because something can happen. Somebody could get hit by a bus like your supervisor, and then they don't sign off on these hours, these wonderful hours that you've got. So periodically, I would have your supervisor fill those out. And then if you leave an agency, if your supervisor has filled out the form, then it goes with you. And that's a good thing. So then you can go someplace else, and you can have 6 different places that you
That
got
quite
your hours.
literally happened to me. My clinical supervisor passed away very shortly after
Oh no.
helping me fill out my paperwork.
Okay.
And so fortunately, from my standpoint, like that,
Yeah.
from a paperwork standpoint, that was taken care of. But I think that's wonderful advice. You just never know.
You don't. You don't want to find yourself.
So it's good having to get into having them sign off, preferably after every time you meet for supervision, just have them sign off.
Yeah.
I did not follow my own advice, but I like that.
Oh, okay. That's no good. That's no good.
No, I think we've kind of talked about this, but I want to just make sure we fully answered your question from earlier, Maria, who asked, let me just read it again. What happens if, after passing the licensure exam, a person gets about half of their required supervised hours and then has to move to another state? Are the Colorado hours lost? Will other states accept those hours? What would Colorado do? Actually, maybe we did mostly answer that question. Oh, she thoroughly answered my questions.
Cool.
Great.
That never happens. So. Okay.
Question. Yeah. When I was reading online, and you don't have it here, just for the LSW, does it have to be like pre-approved? Is that for the ASW test?
It's okay. It used to be that you started with Dora. Dora had to approve you to take the ASWB exam. That changed, I think it's a little more than a year ago. And now you can go directly to ASWB and take the exam. And you can bypass Dora on that one. And then you register to take the exam with ASWB, you do that process, and then you can simultaneously open your application for the LSW with Dora. And then they'll be ready for your exam results and all of that. You can take the jurisprudence anytime you want.
Okay, and just to clarify, with the jurisprudence, so when you register, you have 30 days to take it?
Yeah.
From the time you register?
Yeah. I have a supervisee that got to day 29 and it hit midnight and it reset. So she had to take it again.
I've had a couple friends do it like 3 times. And just forgot to do it.
Yeah.
How long does that take to complete?
I started it and answered like 5 questions. Left it for like 25 days and I'm like, okay.
There you go. Yeah, you were almost there.
Yeah. I finished the last section of that in like 2.5 hours.
I would say 15 to 10 hours.
So it looks like for this supervision form, we really just do like the date, hours, whether it's individual, like we don't have to talk about like what we talked about too. Like it's not that intense.
And this is kind of a preliminary form. There is a post-degree supervision form. And really, with Dora, you don't give them any details. You just fill out, I worked these many hours, and I got, here are my experience hours, here are my supervision hours. I got so many in group and so many in individual. Your supervisor will fill out their information and sign the form, and then you send it off. So Dora doesn't look at the details. And this is kind of a preliminary thing to help you just track what you're doing, so that when it comes time to complete that form for that location, you can do that.
I'm a licensed addictions counselor in Colorado, and that required kind of a similar process, submitting the door and all that stuff. They do want you to break it down basically by Mental Health Practice Act. It was a much larger pain. I literally had to go through and kind of calculate what was what. Oh, wow. A lot.
Well, and
But luckily the licensure LCSW is a lot easier.
That was for your lab.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you double dip, like hours account for your LCSW in your lab?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think for folks considering moving states, being clear about what your hours were in terms of these different kinds of practice activities could be a really helpful way of helping another state understand what you were doing. So for instance, when I moved from Michigan to New Jersey, Michigan was much more comprehensive, similar to Colorado in terms of what all counted as practice, and New Jersey was much more limited. And so at that point, for a lot of reasons, I was like, I'm not going to go back through and try to figure out like which hours counted for which things, because the licensure in New Jersey wasn't that important to me at the time. But if I had done a better job of keeping track of what those different activities were, I think it would have been easier to transfer across states.
Yeah. Also, I've heard, sorry, I have a lot of questions. I heard a rumor too that the test is sort of weighted, so it's kind of like, let's say A may be the best answer, B may be the second best, or is it right or wrong?
I remember there being some close answers, and so like those like how to take the test pieces.
It's choosing the best answer. So it's like there might be 3 on there that look decent, but you have to choose the one that's the best.
And there is only one right answer.
There's
only one right answer. They may,
it's tricky.
Yes.
And so, but I loved how they did the test because you can flag questions to go back to. So my strategy was I went through the entire test. I flagged all the questions I wasn't sure about my answer, then just went back through. And it again with the anxiety stuff, it takes your anxiety level down because you can kind of calculate out like, okay, I'm not sure about 30 questions that I flagged, but I'm really positive about all the other ones. So more than likely I'm going to pass. So my anxiety level went down. Yeah. So it's just like your strategy. Yeah. Use the APGAR button for that strategy. It just takes your anxiety level way down.
Is that one at our library?
Yeah, I think there's 3 of them. There's a practice test that I found. So
researcher in action.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. We had some questions about finding a supervisor. Would now be an okay time to kind of move into that for folks? Okay. Sometimes you might find yourself in an agency where you have a really good supervisor who's also an LCSW who can provide you with the kind of supervision that you're looking for. Sometimes you might be in an agency and you don't like who's available, or there aren't any LCSWs available, and you might look outside your agency. So Janessa's currently in that spot of does not have somebody at her agency. She's the only social worker. And when I got my my LCSW, I was the only one who had a professional degree in working with people in my agency. So there were no social workers. There was nobody for me to receive any kind of supervision from. So I also got outside supervision, external supervision, offsite supervision. It's called a lot of different things. And there are pros and cons to that. I tend to think there are a lot more benefits because you can really focus on the things that you want to focus on as the licensee. So I just kind of jotted down some things to think about when looking for a supervisor. If you're in an agency, do they have someone who has an LCSW that will supervise you? And if they do, that's a cost that you don't have to bear, because if you get external supervision, you are going to have to pay for it in some form or fashion. And we are going to provide you all with a list of folks who do offer lower cost supervision. And that can range anywhere from $35 an hour up to, some folks will charge the private practice rate, which which can be up to $140, $150 an hour. Sometimes agencies who don't have someone on board to supervise you will pay for it, or they will offer you a little bit more when you're negotiating your salary with them to pay for supervision. If you don't have somebody in the agency that can supervise you, or if you're just not feeling a good connection with the person that's available, then you can get referrals from colleagues and friends, or just from people you know. The Clinical Society is great for being able to come together and really meet people who you might connect with, who can provide supervision for you. There are, I think the NASW has a standard on supervising, clinical supervising. I think they say 2 years post your terminal licensure to supervise. Like, you want to have gotten your LCSW and practice for 2 years before you start supervising. So that's a good kind of rule of thumb for you all. Really is good to have somebody maybe 5 years post-graduation who's had, they've gone through the licensure process, and then they've worked as an independent autonomous practitioner for a period of time after that. You want somebody that's got experience supervising. You all may find yourselves in settings where you have somebody who just graduated 2 years ago, just got their LCSW, and who's now going to be your supervisor. So that individual probably doesn't have any experience supervising. It may not be the best fit. You want to have somebody, you want to work with somebody that you've got good rapport with. It's just like working with clients. You're building that working alliance, and you absolutely want to be able to connect with your supervisor. Otherwise, it really limits the kind of learning that can take place, and it can become adversarial if you don't have a good experience. Looking for someone with a similar theoretical orientation. I am very specific in how I work, and so if I'm going to work with a supervisee, I let them know, what my approach is, my theoretical orientation, how I approach supervision. I am certainly always open to different perspectives and different types of skill sets, modalities, and just new ways of learning. But I do work in a very specific way, and I conceptualize cases through a very specific lens. So Janessa seems to put up with me in that regard, and that's good. And I think you also have a similar mindset. You also want somebody who has experience working with the population that you're working with. You don't want somebody who's never worked with a child client before being your supervisor when you're working with children and families. That wouldn't work out so well, because they probably don't know what they need to really help you. You also want a supervisor who's going to focus on 3 very important aspects of supervision, which is education. These are different functions: education, administration, and support. The education piece really is that clinical learning, talking through cases, applying your theory to practice, conceptualizing your work with a client, understanding what brings a client into treatment and why. The administration piece, it's paperwork. It's getting informed consent. It's record keeping. It's doing your notes. It's all the things that really keep you out of trouble. It's doing risk assessments if you've got a suicidal or homicidal client. It's doing all of these things and documenting them. It's really important to have someone who has know-how with that and is comfortable talking through those things with you. And finally, the third aspect is very important, and that is support. We are human beings, and when we do this work, it can be pretty hard on us. We've got to have somebody we can talk through some of the more difficult aspects of doing this work, and we can talk about balance and self-care and helping you figure out, is this a clinical issue? Are we having issues of transference, countertransference, and that can be understood clinically? Or is your own stuff really coming up, superseding your work with the client, and maybe you need to get into doing your own work? Somebody who can really challenge you on that and encourage you to get the additional support you need. And you do also want somebody who's competent to help you navigate the licensure process in DORA. You really do, because you want to be able to sleep at night. So those are some of my thoughts on finding a qualified supervisor. How about you two? What are anyone here, any additional thoughts on supervisors, finding one, and any questions you all may have as well?
I think that's pretty comprehensive. Yeah, the piece about the education, administration, support, you do want to have a balance because I think oftentimes, and at least in my experiences, it's probably been off balance in some ways. I find myself throughout my supervision process, I did go and see other supervisors through the Colorado Society for Clinical Social Work just for additional support. And I'm also lucky too, again, being in an agency, you have other peers that are LCSWs that are not necessarily your supervisor that you can also turn to. So I felt confident in that regard.
Yes. So you're saying that we only pay for a supervisor if they're an external?
Yeah,
But if they're already at the agency there, then you don't pay for it.
right. You won't have to pay for it. And there are some folks who will do pro bono. I've done pro bono supervision for folks kind of with that intention that you'll pay it forward and that you will do the same for somebody someday. So you may find those folks as well.
So you can use like a list.
Yep. Yeah. I've asked I'm not sure she's responded to me yet. I asked the clinical society admin person, and I asked her to email to you, Kay, the list. And so Kay will get that out to you all.
And I do recommend when you're out of school and you're in interviews, ask about supervision. Is there an LCSW on staff that will supervise me and I get supervision hours?
Don't be afraid to educate the person interviewing you also. I was interviewed by a non-social worker because I work in hospice. So my supervisor in hospice is actually a nurse. Had no idea what LCSW is per se, didn't understand licensing, why it's important. So I really advocated for what I was asking for, and I also negotiated my salary that way. I was like, basically tack on this much money in your offer so I can pay for outside supervision if you can't provide it. And it makes you look good. You know what you're talking about, you value yourself, you want to get licensed, it just only makes you look better to them.
Right.
So I felt like it really went well. Not being afraid to just provide that.
You were saying you
Yeah.
did
I did.
that falls under.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun actually because I had a unique position at the shelter. I worked at the Boulder Shelter for the Homeless. I was a long-term housing case manager. So I worked with folks who were either in our on-site program for anywhere up to 9 months, up to another 2 years, and supported services beyond that in temporary housing, transitional housing. And I met with all of my clients weekly for at least half an hour. And there's only so much case management you can do. And then it really becomes something more clinical. And my supervisor was wonderful in helping me to really develop those skills in different ways when I was meeting clients to really try to help them work through different things that were going on for them. It was an incredibly rewarding experience, and it all counted. There are lots of different ways to get those hours that may, on the surface, not seem like it'll fit, but they do. You can navigate that. If you have a supervisor who can help you think outside the box, you can make this work for you. You can make pretty much any direct service kind of role very clinical. Yeah. I think they even say in the Mental Health Practice Act that you can do psychotherapy with one interaction with a client. Like I know folks who have worked for Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners and gotten licensed that way, and they're just taking calls. They never even meet a client. Yeah. So that works as well. Lots of different ways. Yeah.
You're saying for clinical hours, tracking those, like you would say, I worked today at 4 hours, I was meeting with clients with individual psychotherapy, and then 4 hours I was, doing something on here. Would you track like that specifically for your hours?
I never did because even though I used to have a different field that was very detail oriented and numbers oriented, I am not so much in my real job now. So no, I did not do that. I kind of thought of like, I'm interacting and working with clients all day long, every day. And most of what I do is related to interacting with them. Even documentation counts as that, you know, the clinical stuff, not just the general social work stuff. So document, you know, when you're documenting, when you're engaged in supervision, when you're having staff meetings, clinical meetings, all of that really counts. It's if you're doing, let's say you are a part-time clinician and a part-time grant writer. Then you're going to want to track how much time am I spending over there on more administrative functions that would still fall under the remaining social work activities. But when you've got that big of a distinction, you definitely want to be able to make sure at least half of your hours are falling under the clinical realm. Does that answer your question?
Would you all like still recommend kind of keep that detailed?
Probably.
Yeah.
But, I mean, yeah.
Would I recommend it? Yes. Did I
Yes.
do that? No.
Yes,
That's
okay,
a
so,
report too.
yeah.
I set up the Zoom conversation to last until 8, and it's 7:54.
Okay.
All right, so folks, what do you got?
So I,
Yeah.
so I just want to make sure,
Yeah.
want to make sure we get all questions answered and
Yeah.
respect for everyone's
This
time.
might be kind of can you have more than one supervisor?
Yes,
Or is it recommended that you have like one person?
and I wouldn't recommend it. Here's why. Yours, I should have said this, and I'm gonna have
So it's
this
like
working
jobs or
under.
fields or positions or something.
When you are working with a supervisor towards licensure, you are working under their license. They are responsible for your work. So if you are in an agency and you've got a couple different supervisors, it gets really messy as to who's responsible for which clients. And so I would highly recommend one supervisor. And I, as a supervisor, would not want to supervise someone who's got multiple supervisors towards licensure, because it gets really messy. And if something happens, I'm on the hook, and it's really tough to prove who is it that I am responsible for if there are multiple people, and then everybody becomes responsible for everybody. Everybody's in trouble with Torah. So yeah,
I'm hearing you say multiple supervisors at the same time,
yes.
but maybe also if I'm working
yeah.
someplace for a year and then work somewhere else and get
Yeah.
different supervision, that
Yes.
would make sense.
That would make sense. The other thing that would make sense, because I got all Dora, I got all scared there for a minute. So the other thing, let's say you have two different jobs. Let's say you're working over here at a community mental health center, and over here you're working for another agency working with kids. You may have two different supervisors, and that's
Okay, what if,
yeah.
what if that might be it? So
Yes, so that's fine. Absolutely.
What if like your agency offered, or through the community, some kind of group supervision, but you also had, you know, an LCSW you were
Yes.
working with? Because I know
Yes.
that happens quite
It does happen, and that is something I think. So I'm thinking of this from a liability standpoint as a supervisor. I probably would not be comfortable with that scenario unless that person was. I don't know. I don't think I'd be comfortable with two different supervisors, because how do you navigate which clients you're responsible for? And are we both on the hook? And are we getting different stories about, you know, what's occurring in the clinician's practice? I think that just gets a little too complicated. But it could, you know, you will probably find people who would be comfortable doing that.
And as someone who had two supervisors in my last year internship, I would not recommend it. It's kind of,
Yeah, being put in the middle, different opinions, being asked to choose.
Therapy jokes. I am not hearing any last questions from our friends here on Zoom.
Okay,
fall asleep.
No, they say thank you.
great.
Awesome.
If you have any questions, email us, call us. We're happy to help.
Yeah.
And for those who emailed me, I'll send out information as soon as I have all of the relevant documents, probably tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, thanks all.
Bye. A virtual round of applause for our presenters.
Thank you all. Any other loose ends folks want to kind of tie up, hear more about, using, certain questions?